Hey, I'm Pep, and this is a Pep Talk. Now today, we're going to talk about kingmaking. So the term kingmaking comes from ancient medieval times when knights would just basically take over a kingdom and force in a new king by choice. So they chose to make that a king. I'm just making this up. I have no idea where the term comes from. But in board games, what it means is essentially when you get to a point in the game where you don't feel like you can win, you just choose another player to win. Now, it's not quite that simple. Sometimes there's a little bit more complication involved. It might just come down to you have to choose A or B, and either that's going to make one player win or another. It's not necessarily that you're maliciously trying to do this. It's more that you just have to make the choice. So really, this is going to be about how to make that choice, when it's appropriate to make that choice, and how to make it more fun? Alright, so first up is, when does this happen? Well, a lot of times it'll happen right at the end of the game. Maybe the game has 7 or 8 rounds, you're on the final round, and you're put in a position where 2 players essentially have equal chances of winning, and you have to do something. Maybe you have to attack one of them, and maybe you don't. And that's kind of where we want to get into this first. If you don't have to kingmake, you probably shouldn't. It's not really fair or nice for you to do it. Of course, people have fun with different things. Maybe you've done a lot of mean things to player A the entire game, so if you have the choice, you let them win kind of as like a, hey, sorry for everything I've done, but you caught the win now. And maybe on the other scale, player B is somebody who's been rather vicious to you. So kind of in spite, you get to make player A win so that they can't. And you know what? That does sound fun. It sounds entertaining to kind of turn the game around on a player. But what doesn't sound fun is if it doesn't really benefit you, or you like really go out of your way to kingmake. And I think that's where people have the problem. If you have to spend every action on your last turn in order to just nail the coffin in on this one person, or you just do things that make no sense other than to hurt them, that just seems mean and, again, malicious. But if it's a byproduct of whatever you're doing, then it's probably fine. Some games, it really does come down to you just having to make a choice. You just have to pick, are you doing this or that? And whichever one you do makes them win. An example of that is climbers. If you've ever played the game before, things like that will happen. You're essentially trying to climb a tower, but if on your turn you have to take a block, there may only be 1 or 2 blocks left. And if you take block A, it makes it so player 1 will lose. If you take block B, it makes it so player 2 will lose. Either way, you're going to lose. And you don't have the option of saying, oh, I pass, I'm not going to do anything. You have to do it. So that can get rough. Now, the other situation where kingmaking can happen, and I find it makes me a little uncomfortable, is when one player maybe isn't enjoying the game anymore, or just doesn't want to play and wants to finish the game, get on to something else, and so they essentially do something that guarantees one player to win and says, okay, they win now, let's go do something else. To me, that's really not fun, and again, it's kind of mean-spirited, and on top of that, it's kind of selfish of the player who's doing it in a lot of cases. Especially if the other 2 players are actually, you know, in a very deadlocked battle and they're having fun trying to work it out. It's kind of strange for one player to just say, no, you know what, that person wins, let's do it. Something else, I'm not having fun anymore. It is important that everyone has fun, but yeah, I don't feel like it's appropriate for you to end the game on purpose. Now again, on the topic of when can this happen, the thing is, it's a strange mentality. I mean, have I done it? Sure. Has it happened in games that I've played? Definitely. But usually people wait until the exact last round of a game in order to essentially kingmake. But the thing is, sometimes halfway through a game, you could have already essentially figured out that you're not going to win. Well, why don't people just start kingmaking then? Now, of course, don't get me wrong, I know some people who do that. But that's the thing is, if the whole point is when you've decided you can't win, then you just start, like, purposely trying to thwart someone else or mess the game up, then, yeah, I don't understand why it's relegated to the last round. I don't think it should be happening anyways, but yeah, why don't people just start off and they make a mistake in round one and say, oh, well, I lost because of that, so I'm going to purposely take this resource you need for the rest of the game, not spend it, and just build a tower out of it. Now, of course, if you're listening, you probably think, well, that sounds really mean and cruel, and you probably just wouldn't play with someone who plays games that way. But that's what I'm saying. Why does it matter whether they do it in round 1 or round 7? Like, it's essentially the same thing. You have less of it happening, so I guess you have less time to get frustrated with that player, but yeah, it's really the same thing. They're just throwing the game for someone on purpose. I really feel like this video is just going to turn into a really long rant of saying, stop king-making people, it's not fun for everyone. But I really want to try to take it and spin it in a different way. Maybe some situations where king-making is super appropriate. But before that, one of the ways that king-making happens that I think players might not really realize is king-making is whenever you target somebody who's in first place. Now, especially during the end game. A good example is the other weekend we were playing Twilight Imperium, and someone was in a position where they essentially could very clearly win. Now, rather than just playing the game normally, continuing, seeing if they won, we all started kind of pointing it out, how we could win, and we just sat there for 10 or 15 minutes before deciding on which of the roles, the tactics, I don't remember what they're called. Whatever they're called. The point is that we sat there for 15 to 20 minutes and just discussed exactly how we could thwart him and how to stop him from winning. But the thing is, everybody else, with the exception of one player, was in a position where they could possibly or come very close to winning on that round as well. So by all working together to stop this person in the lead, you're just letting somebody else win that round. Now, of course, there's some deception and tactics because you try to steer people in a way that'll help you win. But, for example, for the player who can't win, and in this situation, I actually couldn't win either. I could get within 1 point, but he and I, in that discussion, essentially have no stake. We can't win, so why are we purposely stopping one person from winning in order to let 2 other people win? And yeah, if it was a case where it was a possibility of winning, that would be different. But in this case, the objectives are public. We know whether or not winning is going to happen. So we're basically saying, well, you worked really hard and you happen to be winning at the end, so no, we're going to target you and stop you from winning. And he did bring this up after the game, that it seems like that happens quite often in the game. And he's not wrong. And that's the thing is, a lot of times people will target the person in the lead. And you know what? Early in the game, that's fine. Someone gets a big lead. You want to target them a little, make sure to knock them down. Excellent. That's probably how you should play a game. But by doing this king-making, trying to thwart the person in the lead so someone else can win mentality, at the end of a game, you're basically saying that in order to win, you have to purposely try to seem like you're losing for most of the game and then gain a lot of points at the end. And I just feel like it shouldn't come down to every game feeling that way. And you know what? If it just turns into that where people try to stop him and attack him and thwart him, that's fine. But my problem is when it comes to the 15 to 20 minutes of discussion and it comes to the out-of-game talk where the game has to pause and stop. Someone says that person's going to win or that person could win, and it just grinds it to a halt and makes everyone start planning and plotting against them. And it just, yeah, it feels wrong in the moment. And at the same time, though, you also don't want to win a game because people just didn't notice that you had the opportunity. I've won a game like that before, where I walked in and I took a thing and I'm like, well, I got the 7 objectives, so I won. And everyone's just like, oh, okay. You know, they couldn't do anything about it. It just happened and oops. So I don't know, maybe there's a balance that needs to be had. You know, people should probably target and try to take out the person in the lead, but maybe it shouldn't become an open, malicious discussion about exactly how to stop them. Again, unless that's your table's playstyle, maybe you all have fun with it, who knows. But let's talk now about why king-making can be a good thing, and maybe how to do it effectively. First up, I'm going to go with one of my favorite topics when it comes to board games, and that is alliances. I love having allies in games, especially when it's a game that really breeds alliances and makes sense. And in essence, this can be the ultimate form of king-making. If you have a very fervent ally and you decide that you're going to be their ally until the end, well, in essence, you do want to try to win, and you should try to win. You shouldn't just push someone from the start to victory. But the thing is, if you have the opportunity between letting them win or letting someone else win, well, they're your ally. So of course you help them win. Or at the very least, you try to thwart the person that's stopping them. Either way, the point is, because you're in an alliance, not only is Kingmaking good because you're staying true to the person that you had a promise with the entire game, but it's also fair. No one is going to say, oh, how dare you help them win? It's like, well, what did you think I was going to do? Help my ally lose? You know, it doesn't really make sense. And if you play games that way, you'll tend to find that people know you will react that way near the end of a game, and they'll know you as an ally that they can trust. So it's more likely that someone will approach you and possibly help you in the same way. And at that point, the Kingmaking doesn't feel malicious, it feels strategic, it feels honest, honorable, I don't know. Maybe I just like that because I like having allies. And the whole allies thing can give you a reason to Kingmake in the opposite way as well. Because if you spend almost an entire game being allies with someone, and then they betray you, and then are about to win, and you get to kind of decide which player can win in some way, you're not going to help your ally, you're going to help the other person. You're going to say that's what you get for breaking our alliance, right? And again, because it's part of a formation of an agreement mid-game, I don't think people are going to be as upset or annoyed by it. If you happen to play Magic the Gathering, this kind of thing happens a lot. I mean, at least in my games. And it's not that you have an alliance for a full game. It's more that you have little temporary agreements. You know, someone plays something, you say, listen, I could counter that or I could destroy it, but if you let me do this, or if you don't attack me with it for the next turn or two, you know, I'll let it slide. And so again, this can create the same kind of agreements. Now, in a game like that, especially if you happen to be playing with, I want to say odd numbers, 3 especially, you really want to be careful in any game, not just Magic, of putting yourself to a point where it really seems like 2-on-1. And that, in my opinion, is where Kingmaking can become the most stressful. Because if it seems like 2 players have been teaming up on you the whole game, and then at some point near the end, the other just decides to let the other win, well, that doesn't feel good. You know, you should probably try to find some way to be even, and really, if there are only 3 of you, maybe you should avoid the situation that would let you Kingmake at the end, if you can. Oh wait, I'm getting back into the negative parts of Kingmaking. Okay, we gotta make it positive at least once more. Kingmaking can be a great way in order to, I don't want to say fudge a game. How to word this? Let someone win. I know a lot of people don't like letting people win if it's their first time, or if you're playing with kids or whatnot. But if you're put into a situation where you can let someone win when it's their first time playing a game, they're likely going to come out of it with a pretty good feeling. Like, you know, I enjoyed this game, I had a lot of fun, I just barely won, especially. And just barely winning feels a lot better than just barely losing, especially if it's your first time. And for a more seasoned player who had lost, they'll likely see what happened, understand, and think, oh yeah, like I basically could have won if that person didn't do it, so... And you know what? That's the other good thing about Kingmaking. At the end of the day, you can have this mentality that when the game count came down to it, those 2 players, in theory, tied, and one person let one win. And I know that's not what actually happened, but if it makes you feel better about the fact that you were maliciously targeted with Kingmaking, think about the fact that you essentially were about to win if people hadn't ganged up on you. Now it sounds bitter. I sound bitter. And this really can be applied early on in the game, especially, again, if you're playing with a new player, or your child, or just someone who you think maybe would benefit more from not necessarily winning the game, but from having a more positive experience with the game. So if you have the opportunity to give someone a resource that maybe would help them with a particular quest, maybe you do that. Especially if that player is maybe not doing so well. And In my opinion, kingmaking can apply to helping anyone excessively, even if that person would be losing, especially if you're doing it early on. If you keep giving advantages to one player, just because that player is losing doesn't mean that you aren't still kingmaking them. You're trying to take them and bring them up and turn them into the king. And just because I thought of it in this moment, this also applies to role-playing. I had a friend who used to bring this up before, that when he would play with, not necessarily just newer players, but players who maybe enjoyed the role-playing aspect more than the numbers aspect, they would essentially find every opportunity to help that person into the spotlight and to help that person be king-made, brought up onto a pedestal, so the NPCs would react more positively with them, so they get more screen time, more interaction. They'd have a more interesting experience with the game, rather than just rolling dice and fighting enemies. And they didn't mind that. They didn't want the limelight. They played D&D plenty. They just wanted the newer player to feel involved and to make sure that they had fun with the game. And they did. That's the thing. When you have somebody that's essentially helping and giving you suggestions and saying, you know, rather than just talking to the NPC themselves or saying, oh, you should have said that, finding ways to hint at it and give you suggestions and give you ways to bring it all back and just make it a positive experience. That got really buzzwordy. Long story short, winning and succeeding feels good. If you haven't played a game before, or you usually happen to lose at a game, having that little boost, even if it's provided by another player, can make you feel better, make you enjoy yourself a little more. If that ends up helping you win, and they king-made you, then great. My advice, though, is just try to make sure people don't feel hostile about it. If at the end of the game it turns into a shouting match because of the king-making, you know, just actually talk about it. Talk with your group about ways you can prevent it. Maybe you just an active passive rule that if you have the option of helping two people win, you literally have to do nothing. If you can't win yourself, you just have to pass, do actions that you know don't affect either of them, etc. You know, it seems weird to put that rule into a game, but if that's what you need for your group to not fight about that kind of thing, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe try to find games that don't have as many opportunities to king-make. Maybe even make a little chart where it's like, well, Jim, you were king-made into 3 games this week, and I was only king-made into 2, so it looks like it's my turn. That sounds like a weird suggestion, and I kind of hope somebody does that, because that would just be funny. And to close off, if you don't care about king-making and you think it doesn't matter, you know, people can just help other people win or force the game to end, and like if that's how they want to play, that's how they want to play. Imagine if in the rule book, because this is what the situation is in most cases of kingmaking. It's a literal A or B, you choose who wins based on your action. So imagine you read a rule book in a game, and at the end of the game, if you're tied, the tiebreaker rule says, ask the remaining players in the game and they choose who wins. That doesn't feel good. There's got to be 0 games where that's written in the rule book. For a reason, because you want to win off your own merits, and you want someone else to win off their own merits, not off of people just letting them win. But anyway, that's been my pep talk. I'll just keep going in circles if we keep going here. So if you agree, if you have any other suggestions for ways to help prevent kingmaking or just different ways of looking at it, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you just disagree completely and you have some good arguments or reasons why kingmaking is maybe just a big positive in games or why it just doesn't matter, also leave them below. I mean, I'm open-minded. I'll definitely read them and take a look. Even just sitting here talking about it, I sort of started to sway myself a little in the other direction, depending on the game and who's playing. But anyway, that's the end of the video, and I hope you see me later. Does that sound weirdly arrogant? Like refusing to say I hope to see you later? It's just I don't actually see you, but you'll see me, and I mean, I do hope to see you at like a convention or something, or I don't know. Your picture is technically in the little picture box there in the comments, so if you make a comment, I do hope to see you. So you know what? I do hope to see you later. very soon after watching this video when you leave a comment. But I still hope you see me later. Let's see each other. Okay, I'm leaving.